Hello friends, James Stevenson welcoming you back to part 15 of my Tesla earnings forecast video review series. We are very close to the end now. We better be, because Tesla's about to report production and deliveries on the 2nd of October, so I need to wrap things up. And my co-host Loki will help me do that. There he is, curled up in bed. You saw him eat breakfast in the previous video, in part 14. In this section, what I'm going to talk about is how I forecast Tesla production and deliveries. So let's scroll on up from where we began the last video at row 1167 all the way to the top. What is the top of this tab? We've seen the second 1,000 rows, but we haven't seen the first 1,000 rows. Well, you're going to see them in this video. And the next video. So in part 16, I'll talk about how I forecast revenue and cost of sales. In part 15, I'm just going to talk about how I forecast production deliveries and ending inventory and stuff. And that's only a couple of hundred rows here. So this video will not be as long as the last one was. I don't know how long part 16, well, I don't know how long any video is going to be because I don't practice these ahead of time. So I don't really have a feel for how long a video I'm going to make. The previous video was 69 minutes plus 4 minutes and 20 seconds. If you go back and check it, don't check it too close, but it was real close to that. This one will not be that long. So on my September 10th forecast, where do you start if you want to make a forecast this detailed? How do you decide how much you want to forecast for production and for deliveries? Well, we can look at what we had in the forecast for previous quarters, like what happened last year, each quarter, and then guess at it. That's it. That's what forecasting is. Forecasting is guessing. The first rule of forecasting is whatever you forecast, it will be wrong. The second rule of forecasting is be less wrong. So I'm trying to be less wrong every forecast that I do. Trying to dial it in a little bit closer, hoping for more accuracy than I had the quarter before. What do we have here for Fremont Model S? I have exactly the same expectations for production that I had in the previous two quarters. 9,360 vehicles produced is what I have in the forecast. I have that going just a little higher in Q4. I think probably more people are going to want to buy Model S now that the price is so much lower than it was before. That's not a given because interest rates are so high these days, but if you compare any similar vehicle to Model S in terms of performance, in terms of fuel efficiency, in terms of technology, in terms of software, in terms of autonomy, any dimension you can think of to compare the value you're getting as a buyer versus what competing manufacturers are trying to sell you. I don't know how anybody chooses to buy a Porsche when the Model S Plaid is way, way better, right? Compare a Taycan to a Model S across all the dimensions that matter to a buyer and tell me who would buy the Porsche Taycan. Who would buy that thing? Who would pay twice as much for a car that isn't as good? Some people are, some people will, but I think more people should be buying Model S than are. But this is what I have in my forecast. Okay, so let's say we think Tesla could make 1,000 Model S's per week. Why is that a good assumption? I think the most Tesla has ever made is about that much. So they can't make more than about 100,000 Model S and X vehicles per year. So you take 1,000, you add another 1,000, that's 2,000. You multiply that by 50 weeks a year, it's about 100,000 worth of capacity. And then you say, okay, how many weeks worth of production are we going to be getting at that capacity? And then how efficient do we think the factory is going to be on average over the course of this quarter at output relative to the maximum possible? And with those three input assumptions, you get production. Production is just A times B times C. If you know how many you can make per week and how many weeks you're going to be making cars, and during those weeks, how efficient you're going to be at yielding output relative to capacity, that's how you get production. So the thing you know next already is, well, Tesla doesn't report it in this level of detail, but they do report it in total. Ending inventory. Last quarter's ending inventory becomes this quarter's beginning inventory. So if you take the number you had to begin the quarter and you add the number you produced during the quarter, that'll give you the number that are available to be sold. So from there, what you need to know is, all right, how many are going to be left in inventory at the end of the quarter? And my assumption here is, using the 75 days of production per quarter industry standard assumption, that Tesla would be holding 60 days worth of supply on hand. Why 60 days? Model S and Model X are only produced at Fremont, and so they have to supply the entire world. And they may not get extremely efficient logistics shipping those around the world. So some of those are going to be on a boat or in a port or at a service center waiting for a buyer to come pick them up at the end of the quarter. And it doesn't make sense for Tesla to pay extra to try to expedite that shipping so that those buyers take delivery before the quarter ends. Tesla used to do that, but they stopped. So that's what gets you a really high ending inventory number like that. Then, hopefully that didn't mess up for you the way it does for me. Sometimes my big 70-inch screen goes black on me for a second. So you can probably see that on the shot of me when it goes dark for a second and comes back up. I hope that doesn't keep happening. But I'll keep moving with this tour after I make sure I've got this concept explained adequately for the first section, because it's just going to keep repeating the rest of the way down. So if you know how many you produced, you know how many you had to start the quarter, and you know how many, or you feel good about a forecast for how many you're going to end the quarter still having an inventory, then it's just math to get to the deliveries. You take the sum of these two and you subtract how many you're going to still be in inventory at the end of the quarter, and you must have delivered the rest. There's no other explanation for what would have happened to them, right? So that's how you get to the deliveries. And then I have to forecast the amount of those that are going to be leased. Tesla does give us a percentage leased in the production and deliveries report when they publish it. So for prior quarters, you can see what those amounts were. And I've got an assumption in that 11% of Model S are going to be leased. Model X is going to be real similar here. Same 1,000 max production capacity per week. Same 13 weeks of production, but with a higher production efficiency percentage. Tesla does sell more Model X than Model S. A lot of people will see a Model 3 performance as being about as good as a Model S. I mean, it's not as good as a Model S, or let alone a Model S Plaid. But it's pretty much the same use case. Model S is a little bigger, has a little more comfortable seating capacity, a little bit more storage, but they're both luxury sedans, right? So since the Model 3 is so much more affordable, Tesla's gonna sell a lot more Model 3s than Model S. Then when you compare Model X against Model Y, Model X has a lot more cachet going for it, you know, from the Falcon Wing doors to the Plaid performance in an SUV. It's very rare. Like, you can get maybe a Porsche SUV or a Bentley SUV that are tuned for performance, but not a lot of great examples out there of super fast SUVs, and Model X definitely is one of them. You're not going to beat Model X on the drag strip with very many vehicles of any kind, let alone SUVs. Okay, so I have Tesla producing more Model X than Model S in my forecast for Q3, and the same-ish assumption. So I've got a 57-day supply assumed for Model X, which makes the math here yield more deliveries, 10,220 deliveries, So between these two, let me click here and here. That's 19,225 from Q2. I don't really have that increasing by very much, 19,500 in Q3, and then some more than that, almost 21,000 in Q4. To end the year, Q4 is a pretty good quarter seasonally, but these are not the most important vehicles for Tesla anymore. They once were, but now it's really all about Model 3 and Model Y and getting Cybertruck ramped up. Let's look at the Fremont Model 3, the Model 3s that are being produced in California. I've got an expectation that we're not going to get 13 weeks worth of production out of Model 3 at Fremont because of line upgrades. Elon said those were going to be for all factories. I don't think it should be significant at Fremont, but you got to figure something, so 1 week is something. So if you only have 12 weeks worth of production, and if you're doing it at about the same production efficiency I think they were at last quarter, they're usually mid 50% production relative to a max capacity of 8,500. Now that's the old capacity from when they had another line that's now being used for Model Y, and that explains why this percentage is so low compared to all the other models at all the other sites. I didn't knock this down for the portion that became Model Y capacity at Fremont. I just left it because I think it still is the capacity. If Fremont needed to make 8,500 Model 3s per week, they could by converting that line back to make Model 3s instead of Model Ys. So if you believe these assumptions, you believe Tesla is going to produce 57,000 Model 3s at Fremont. Then I've got the ending finished goods inventory rising from like a 4.5 day supply to like an 8-day supply in Q3. That seems more reasonable to me. So if you believe that, then Tesla's going to deliver less than they produce. 53,811 is my forecast, with 2,691 of those being leased, or 5% of vehicles delivered, which is the same as I had plugged in for Q2 to tie out to what Tesla reported. Then we get to the Fremont Model Ys. I have production for Fremont Model Y at a maximum weekly capacity of 6,000. I have them down 1 week for line upgrades as well, at a production efficiency of 87%, which is close to where they've been in previous quarters in my model, yielding production of 62,640. If we think the inventory of Fremont Model Ys is also going to increase, from 6.7 to 8 days worth of ending inventory on hand at the end of Q3, then you also believe they won't deliver quite as many as they produce, and it'll be 61,000 from Fremont that get delivered. Nothing for the Fremont Roadster yet. In the future, Tesla will make that. It's dessert. You kind of have to eat your vegetables before you get to dessert, Elon sometimes says. All right, let's take a trip across the Pacific Ocean to Shanghai and look at their Model 3 production. They can make 9,000 Model 3s per week, but I think in Q3 they only got 11 weeks worth of production out, and only at 80% production efficiency is what I think. So I think they're only going to be able to get 79,000 vehicles produced. Now, they only got 10 weeks worth of production in Q2, and they only got 9 weeks worth of production in Q1 this year. So that's actually improving a little bit here. And I have it improving a little bit more in Q4. Shanghai has more holiday shutdowns than the US does. Some of those are state mandated, like if you wanted your workers to come in on a state holiday in China, I think you'd have to pay them double time, which doesn't make sense for Tesla to do, so they just let workers have that time off. And those holidays happen in a few different quarters throughout the year. I think Q3 is usually the only quarter that you would get 13 weeks worth of production out, so kind of a shame that that's the quarter that Tesla had to do the Highland Model 3 production upgrades. But good news out of China is that they appear to be already ramped up to really high numbers being output from that factory, so maybe not very big negative financial impact from the downtime they experienced. So if you think these are the right assumptions, then you think they're going to make 79,200 Model 3s in Q3. And if you think their inventory, including cars on the water to the rest of the world, Shanghai is Tesla's export hub for producing Model 3s and Model Ys, then if you believe they went from 33 days of supply last quarter, holding at that same level, 33 days worth of sales at the end of the quarter, then they'll deliver 76,465 Model 3s that were produced in Shanghai in Q3. What about Shanghai Model Y? They can make a lot of these. They can make 15,000 per week, and they're making close to that. So we see them at a very high production efficiency for Model Y, but I'm only going to assume 11 weeks worth of production. Now they can beat this maybe if they didn't need very much Model Y line upgrade downtime. But if these are the right assumptions, then Tesla will make 153,450 Model Ys in Shanghai. And if their ending inventory swells from 20.6 days of supply last quarter to 22 days of supply in Q3 due to goods in transit, then they'll deliver 147,391 Model Ys. This is the world's best-selling vehicle, the Model Y. Produced, and more of them get produced in Shanghai than any of the other 3 places Tesla makes Model Ys. All right, let's go to another one of those. Here's the Berlin Model Y. How many can they make per week? I think they're at about 7,250 maximum possible capacity right now, but that number goes up every quarter by a little. I've got the 2 weeks worth of downtime assumption in here for them, and I have them at a little lower production efficiency than we saw in previous weeks, so maybe we'll get 46,255 Model Ys produced in Berlin in Q3. Then if we see a 12-day supply of Model Ys at the end of the quarter left in ending inventory, they'll be able to deliver 45,630 Berlin-produced Model Ys in Q3, and that's Berlin. Then from Gigatexes, I've got a section here for Gigatexes. Cybertruck and Semi are here. Cybertruck is being produced in Austin. Semi is still being produced in Nevada, but I think they're going to move it to the Austin Tesla headquarters factory later on and give it a permanent home. I could be wrong about that. Maybe the permanent home will be in Sparks, Nevada, near the Gigafactory 1 battery cell production location for efficiency that way. So you don't have to transport all those battery packs. Because Semi needs a ton of batteries to get that long range. 500 miles of range, fully loaded. 80,000 pound Tesla Semi with the fully loaded trailer on US highways. Alright, so what do I have for the Texas Model Y? I've got the same 7,250 Model Y production capacity, but I do have the efficiency taking a step back. This is to get more in line with what Troy's research is showing him for Model Y. I don't always draw much inspiration from what Troy is putting out for his forecast, but he is thinking that the production from Texas is lower this quarter. So I've got 10 weeks worth of production at 45% efficiency, growing a little bit from there. So not as much being delivered from Texas, and maybe some of this is disruption caused by getting to tool up the line for Cybertruck. They're all coming off the same floor of the same building, I think, so there could be, high voltage power line shutdowns or something to get work done safely, something like that, causing more downtime for Model Y. I wish I had the time to follow this stuff really closely, but I have to put something in my forecast, and I don't want to overshoot the mark by a lot. So I've got that in for my assumption there. Then for Cybertrucks, how many can Tesla make per week? Maybe they can make 9. Sorry, maybe they can make. I've got them at 1% efficiency on 1,000 per week, rising to 1,500 per week. But I've got 9 weeks worth of production this quarter, 11 weeks worth of production in Q4. If I can read my own table of numbers, so if you think it's 1,000 per week worth of maximum production capacity of the design intent of the line in Austin for Cybertruck so far, and if you think they get 9 weeks worth of production, at 1% efficiency, that would yield you 90 Cybertrucks. And if 10 of them are still in inventory at the end of the quarter, they may all be in ending inventory at the end of the quarter, but these numbers are so small it doesn't matter in terms of the total. Then you would get 80 Cybertrucks being delivered by the end of the quarter, which is a total shot in the dark. I don't think it'll be off by more than 100. And then in Q4, I've got this. Let's take a look at what I have in for 2024 and 2025 here. So I've got this max weekly production capacity ramping up. Every quarter they can make another 1,000 per week more, is what I have here as my assumption. And then they'll be able to have 13 weeks worth of production all year beginning in the start of 2024. And production efficiency will ramp up and get better every quarter as time goes by. So I do have 69% production efficiency by Q4 of 2024 if you believe they'll be at a 5,000 Cybertrucks per week run rate of design intent capacity at 13 weeks worth of production and 69% efficiency. Then you believe in Q4 of next year they'll be making 45,000 Cybertrucks per week-ish and delivering about that many, almost that many. So you can see the ending inventory will keep increasing as the vehicles produced increases. And that's how it ought to be, right? So by the end of 2025, I've got about 100,000 Cybertrucks being delivered per quarter. So you wouldn't get through a 2 million vehicle backlog very fast at a rate of 300,000 per year, which is what I'm forecasting for 2025. But a lot of those deposits may cancel when Tesla asks, okay, your Cybertruck is ready to be delivered in a few weeks. Do you want all 50 Cybertrucks that you reserved? I think a lot of people are going to say, no, I want to cancel 49 of them and only pay you for one Cybertruck. All right, then we have the Semi down here. I similarly have Semi scaling up gradually over time. I think they can only make 8 per week. That's what this says. And that'll go to a bigger number once they get to a permanent location to make Tesla Semi. And then they'll need to scale up the number of weeks of production and the percentage of production for Semi. So maybe by the end of 2024, they'll be producing more than 1,000 Tesla Semis per week. But for those who think Tesla's going to be making hundreds of thousands of semis per week or per year, I don't think they'll make that many. I'm prepared to raise this forecast if it turns out that Tesla has tons of battery cell supply and doesn't need that supply to make more Cybertrucks or whatever. But I think the semi-production, it's best to keep a conservative approach towards that forecast. All right, so if you total all of those up, what do you get? Well, you get maximum weekly production of these numbers, including the 8 per week worth of semis that Tesla can produce, which is why it's a jagged number instead of the very round number we had over here. Yeah, here's the efficiency that yields these totals for vehicles being produced. So my forecast is 450,968 Teslas produced in Q3 with 436,428 deliveries. Do I have extremely high confidence in either of those numbers? No. Tesla might report very different numbers than those. We'll have to wait and see. Could they both be more than they were in Q2? Yeah, they could, if the downtime wasn't as bad as advertised by Elon on the earnings call. That sort of thing does happen sometimes, where the expectations get sandbagged by enough that Tesla beats them. So here's the total ending inventory and beginning inventory. You can see how that's rising over time. I talked about that in a previous video, so I won't say it again. And here's the metric that's the most meaningful in terms of inventory. Hey, is 100,000 vehicles in ending inventory good? Is that bad? How do I know? Well, you make a metric out of it and you say how many days worth of sales were in ending inventory. At the start of last year, it was an extremely low number. This is an order of magnitude lower than legacy automakers have in inventory available to be purchased at dealerships, right? So the legacy automakers are counting it as a sale when they sell to the dealerships, not when the dealerships sell to the end customer, right? So how many Ford vehicles are available to be purchased right now across the world? It's well into the hundreds of thousands, right? Even though Ford isn't holding hundreds of thousands of vehicles on their balance sheet as ending inventory, they're selling to dealerships, and Tesla is not selling to dealerships. Tesla sales centers are holding Tesla-owned inventory for sale, right? So how many days worth of sales are we seeing reported so far this year? About 17 days of sales, if you use the 75-day convention, which is the industry standard. I've got that peaking in Q3 at 21 days of sales. And then on a 12 trailing month basis, it'll be even higher in Q4, 22 days of sales. And then maybe plateau around that level on a 12 trailing month basis, low 20s. It's not going to go to 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 where we see a lot of other automakers. If you follow Car Dealership Guy, @GuyDealership on X, he'll show you how many days worth of supply there are for every brand, and a lot of them are 100 days worth of sales in inventory, right? So these are not alarming numbers, even though they're a lot higher than they were last year. These numbers were too low. Tesla should never have had this few days of sales and ending inventory, and it cost Tesla a lot to achieve these numbers in the form of higher costs per vehicle delivered. All right. I've got an inventory build or drawdown number here, so we can see Tesla inventory last declined in Q1 of 2022 and has been building every quarter since with positive numbers here. I have the first negative number being forecast in Q4, coming down by, 4,000 vehicles or so, and then mostly positive numbers in my forecast thereafter. With a few instances where it comes down, but mostly as Tesla produces more and more vehicles per quarter, it ought to be fine for Tesla's ending inventory to continue growing some, is my perspective on the matter. Then we've got the percent leased here, so that's been low single digits for a while. It's mid single digits now. I've got it hanging out in that area in my forecast. Then ending inventory as a percent of deliveries, you can see, was a very low number. It's just another metric you can see to get comfortable with. Okay, how much is the ending inventory if I compare it against something else? Well, let's compare it against total deliveries and see how many were left in inventory relative to how many got delivered. It's about 20% now. I've got that maxing out at 27.8 in Q3. And then coming down and hanging out around 25% or so in all future quarters. All right, what else is here? Well, I've got subtotals by factory production site. So here's one from Fremont, so you can see what the total vehicles produced and delivered are going to be for Fremont over time. So a little step back in Q3, and then right back to record highs for Fremont in Q4. Shanghai, I have a little more production in Q3 and then a lot more in Q4 to record highs, although I had the deliveries slightly lower from Shanghai in Q3 before bouncing up to more than 250,000 in Q4. Then for Berlin, I've got that step back in Q3 for production and for deliveries, again followed by record highs in Q4. And then for Texas, I've got both of these quarters forecast lower than what I had in my model for Q2 from Texas. And that's this video. That's all the production and deliveries lines there are. The rest of my model is about forecasting revenue and cost of sales. I'll talk about that in part 16. So look forward to that, and I will outro now after waving goodbye to my co-host Loki. And say if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button for me, and if you're not subscribed to my channel and you're watching me on YouTube, you can do that by subscribing over here. Thank you to everyone who supports me, especially my executive producers, Kathy Kitchler and Rebellionaire.com, who signed up on YouTube to subscribe to me at the highest support tier, earning them a shout out and a thank you at the end of every video. And I'll see you in the next one.